Hey, Frank and Dan, thanks for joining. We're just getting everybody together.
No problem.
Dan, when John introduces you guys, who do you want to have him speak first? I figured he could just turn it over to one of you and then you could introduce the rest of your gang.
Yeah, it'll be me.
Okay.
Mainly Frank and I'll drive our presentation, and then Steve will probably jump in and interrupt me because that's what he does best. And then it certainly will be helpful for the Q&A.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I think John Solzer, who will join us shortly here, will be the one to actually introduce you. Hey, John.
Good morning. Or afternoon, I guess it isn't.
I was wondering where you're at, John.
All right, no, that's right.
He
I
just had a long nap. He just got up.
actually played golf today, so
Really? Where?
over at Dave Long's house, he has one of those indoor.
Oh, okay. There's a nice herd of elk on the Meadows course. So
Oh yeah.
we would have had to play around them.
Good afternoon, all. How's it going?
We're on mute.
Keith?
Hi, Keith.
I took it off. Yeah.
While we're waiting, Frank and Dan, just for by way of information, I'm the host of the MC type thing, and one of the things I will do during your presentation is we're trying to limit it to around 20 minutes. So what I will do is at about the 10-minute mark, I'll put up this sign here just to remind you that that you've got 10 more minutes, and then I'll do the same thing at 5 minutes. So just try to keep you on target if that's okay.
Yep, no problem. It's just like the shows. We get it.
Yeah.
I love the signs, John.
Yeah, right.
Keeps me on task.
Well, we've done really well so far, so it's made my job a lot easier. So thank you, Jacob.
So this is Keith with Sunriver Owners Association. So I'm general manager here, and I'm here with Brad Olson, our IT manager, and Jesus Mendoza, IT administrator. So we just give us a few more minutes. We're waiting for a few more owners to sign on. We initially had close to about 70 owners that signed up for today, so should be another great turnout. We'll give them a few more minutes and then we will get going. It looks like we need a couple more from the TDS team to join on as well. So.
Also, do we have, from Frank and Dan and Steve's standpoint, we have somebody coming from Telluride or Crested Butte, or are you guys?
No, that's Frank. Frank used to be the city manager at those locations.
Okay, very good. Sounds great.
Keith, I've got pretty lousy internet connection here. Just checking to see if you can hear me okay.
You can.
I can.
Yeah,
All
we
right, that's
can.
fine. Thank you.
Did you move locations or are you in the same place?
No, I moved to a different location.
Hopefully it's still 85 and sunny.
Yes.
This is a question for Gail or Jacob. Do we still have Brian going to join us today along with Nicole?
Yes.
They should be here.
Let's give 2 more minutes and we will get started, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Brian's on his way.
There he is.
All right, John, let's get started. Hey, please, sir.
Okay. Welcome to the third of 3 scheduled town hall meetings dealing with Sunriver's future telecommunications needs. The first 2 went very well and were very informative and educational, and I think this one will be equally as good. I'm John Solzer, and I'm a longtime Sunriver homeowner and a member of the Telecommunications Task Force. This group was formed 2 years ago by the board to take a look and help the board and ultimately you and the rest of the community determine how we best meet our future telecommunications need. Today, we want to share with you where we are in the process and to try to answer any questions you might have. In addition, we have presentations from both Ben Broadband, our existing cable provider, and also from folks from Gigabit and from Sea Ranch, Telluride, and Crested Butte individual. So you'll hear what they are doing and what they propose we might do in the future. Please submit your questions you have or comments by looking at your chat at the box at the bottom of the screen. We will have the presentations first, and then we'll open it up for questions. And Keith Caceres, assistant general manager will screen those those questions and distribute them. And if any questions we don't get to today, we will then try to put it on our website by the end of the week. And so you can have the answers to those questions on the website. We also would like you to stay on after we get through with the presentations and the question and answers to give you an opportunity to ask any questions of the panel of the task force members. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and turn over the program to Gerhard Vernum, who is the chairman of our task force. Gerhard?
All right, thank you, John. And good afternoon to everybody. Hopefully everybody's having a great day in Sunriver. I have a brief presentation that I'm going to give, and I'll just kind of do a screen share here in a second. And talk a little bit about the Telecommunications Task Force, what we have accomplished so far, and what we will be providing you with some background information on today. This is, as John mentioned, this is our third telecommunications town hall meeting. And so we're glad that all of you could join us. The task force was actually chartered in January of 2019. And the current membership, you can see we've got 5 people from the SROA management team, part of our task force. We've got a couple board members, President Mobley and myself. And we have 5 Sunriver residents, at-large residents. One of the big benefits that we have in terms of the SROA residents is both John Solzer and Dick Lipke, who were involved in some of the telecommunications discussions about 10 years ago when we entered into a contract agreement with Chambers Cable, and ultimately that was ultimately purchased by Ben Broadband. So they bring to the task force a wealth of experience and knowledge from what has taken place over the past 10 years here in Sunriver. I also, on the right side of the screen, you can see there's a web page. This is at the sunriverowners.org website. And so if you go to that website, there is a specific page on telecommunications. There are frequently asked questions there. There's some additional background information. There are links to past seen articles that talk about telecommunications in Sunriver. So this is a good source of information for anybody who wants to learn more about the activities of the Telecommunications Task Force and what we're looking at and what those options, the properties of those options. So I encourage you to go take a look at that, and I want to have a quick shout out to both Keith Caceres and Susan Berger for putting that together, because it does have an awful lot of information that I'm sure many of you will find informative. Yeah, one of the reasons why we have a telecommunication task force is because the owners in our last infrastructure and amenities master plan identified telecommunications as one of their #1 priorities. And so 64% of survey respondents placed the telecommunications infrastructure in the top three choices. And it also received the highest number of votes for the #1 ranking. And so owners have told us, and this is actually pre-COVID, owners have told us that telecommunications infrastructure is important and they would like to see some improvements in what we have in place today. And I think over the last couple of years with the advent of COVID and all the Zoom meetings we've been having, it's only become more important. So what's the current status? There's approximately about 4,200 homes in Sunriver. About 85% of the homeowners subscribe to some service from Ben Broadband. Ben Broadband is currently under contract with the Sunriver Owners Association. That contract expires in this coming June of 2022. There is an option for Ben Broadband to continue to provide services through June of 2027, and they have already expressed an interest in doing that. So we began another part of the motivation for this task force is because we knew we were going to be in a position where if we were going to renew with Ben Broadband, we needed to start those discussions and get those negotiations underway. So a new 15-year contract with Ben Broadband has been negotiated. We have not signed it yet. In this contract, Ben Broadband has agreed to upgrade their network to fiber to the home with a minimum of 100 megabits upload, download speed, and no upfront investment by Sunriver owners, and rates comparable to Ben subscribers. And I will just leave it at that because as John mentioned, we have representatives from Ben Broadband on the call today, and they will give you a lot more detail as to what they're planning for Sunriver. The other alternative that we looked at is building our own fiber optic network. And we have gone out and we've requested bids from contractors, and we have a pretty good idea of how much it would cost to build our own network. And the people from Gigabit Now and some of the installations that they've done will give you some perspective on what it's like to have a community-owned fiber to the home network. And so that's one of the reasons why we invited them to this, is to give you that perspective. Because there are places, and I think we're going to have somebody who has been associated with Sea Ranch, which is a planned community similar to Sunriver down in California. It's about half the size of Sunriver, and they built their own community-owned fiber to the home network, and they'll give you a little bit of perspective on that. One thing I should point out before I get too far is that, we are talking about fiber to the home, and we've had a lot of questions from homeowners as to why we're focusing on this particular technology. And I think you'll hear in the presentation given by Ben Broadband what the advantages of fiber are. But I think just to put it very succinctly, fiber is probably the most future-proof technology for broadband communications available today. And so there are, there are wireless technologies that are improving in their capability each year. But one of the disadvantages for a community like Sunriver is we have a lot of trees, and the higher bandwidth wireless technologies do not transmit very far in an environment where there are a lot of trees. And so that's why we're focusing on fiber to the home. So really there's a choice for owners, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. We can sign a new contract with Ben Broadband, and they have agreed to upgrade their network to fiber to the home. Or we can invest in constructing a Sunriver own fiber to the home network. And you can kind of look at this as like a lease versus a buy situation. And as I mentioned, we'll hear a lot more from Ben Broadband, and we'll also hear from people who have built their own community networks. They provide you with a little bit more information so that we can get from you your perspective and understand what you think would best meet your needs in Sunriver. So that's the extent of my presentation, and so I will turn it back over to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Gerhard. We have now two presentations, both approximately 20 minutes long, that we'll share with you. I'm going to turn over to Jacob Golden with Ben Broadband, and he'll introduce his team and give us his presentation. Jacob.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Jacob Golden, for those of you that haven't read the name blank there on Zoom. I'm from the product management department here at TDS. For those of you that aren't aware, TDS was purchased by Ben Broadband in 2014. So you'll hear us refer to ourselves as TDS, but just know that Ben Broadband and TDS are one and the same. We've been the same team for a few years now, almost 8 years now, it looks like. Just a little background on me. I've been with TDS for 16 years total. I was with Ben Broadband at the time of the acquisition, and I currently live and work out of Redmond, Oregon. I was heavily involved in the Chambers acquisition. For those of you that were around for that, when Ben Broadband purchased Chambers Cable, I was in charge of the office staff throughout the acquisition and integrating with the Ben Broadband teams. And so I spent many months down in Sunriver. It's a great community to be stuck in. It was lots of fun times getting lunch and walking around the community. And of course, my family, we've been enjoying it ever since, just getting out there for, whatever seasonal activity. You guys have great seasonal activities regardless of the weather. So just real quick, I'm going to I'm going to be presenting a little bit later in the presentation. I want to introduce my colleague, Brian Gardner. He's been with TDS he's been in the telecom industry for 33 years total, and has spent the last 20 plus years involved in the delivery of data and internet services. So that is his specialty. So I'm going to let him take the first part of the presentation, and then I'll wrap up.
All right, thank you, Jacob. Can everybody hear me? Okay, and hopefully everybody can see my screen. So again, I'm Brian Gardner. I am the data product manager in charge of our data services, particularly the internet for TDS and Ben Broadband. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about who TDS is. Then I'm going to go into some detail on our network so that you folks have an understanding of our network and how robust it is and what's involved in a network. And then I will end it with a little bit more information on fiber and the products and services that we deliver over our fiber. Okay, so who are we? Well, we're TDS. We go by TDS, Telephone and Data Systems, that stands for. We have wireline operations and cable operations. The operations in Bend and there in Sunriver are cable operations, but we started out as an ILEC, an incumbent local exchange carrier, and we call that our wireline operations. We started over 50 years ago by a gentleman, Leroy T. Carlson. He started by purchasing one telephone company, and then over the years, he acquired more and more telcos and expanded quite a few years back into cable operations and other fiber-based operations as well. But he primarily built the company through acquisitions. Our goals then and now, they have not changed. Mr. Carlson's goal started out as providing the best technology he could to rural communities. All of our first acquisitions were very rural in nature, so he wanted to provide the latest and greatest technologies to those markets. And investment in community. Community was very important to Mr. Carlson. So a little bit about our business. Again, we have our wireline operations, our cable operations. With our wireline operations, which have been around for the 50 plus years, we have a little over 1.2 million connections. We are the 7th largest telco in the United States. And then we have our cable operations that we started many years back. We call that TDS Broadband, and Bend is part of that. And we have service in 8 states, which includes the operations up there in Bend. There's a map that kind of shows where we operate in the different colored states and kind of gives you an idea of where we are. A little bit about our operations, our wireline operations, and we primarily support our fiber-based services out of our wireline operations, although folks work for both entities, have dual roles like I do, but we have 3,100 employees nationwide. That includes everything from the technician on the street that will deliver your service and take care of installing a modem, all the way up to government and regulatory folks, network service people, network operations, product, you name it. We got 3,100 employees nationwide to support our services. Over our fiber optic network, or PON, which stands for Passive Optic Network, we deliver internet, voice, and video services. We also deliver business connectivity to large enterprise type companies, companies that require 10, 20, 50. We just deployed our first 100 gig connection to a large enterprise company the other day. Our PON services that we have deployed most recently provides for 1 gigabit up and down. All of our PON services are symmetrical. So unlike copper-based services where your download is going to be much higher than your upload, all of our PON services are symmetrical. In Q3 of this year, we introduced a new technology called XGS PON. It's a passive optic network, but it's a little different technology method that allows us to deliver, and we introduced 2 gigs up and down in Q3 of this last year. Okay, with that PON network, we also include, if you decide to go with the bulk option, which Jacob will talk about a little later, or we have available, if you take our standard products and services like we have today, modems or gateway routers that we deploy with it. They are Wi-Fi enabled devices. They are Wi-Fi 5 devices, okay? One is included with the service. If you have a large home or a large area you want to cover, we can add additional access points. They're meshed by a Wi-Fi to give you complete whole home coverage. And we are currently looking to deploy Wi-Fi 6. We have some Wi-Fi 6 devices in the lab right now, and we're looking for a Q2, Q3 deployment of our first Wi-Fi 6 gateways, okay? In addition to internet, we provide a video service. The video service is 100% IP based, so it's delivered over your high-speed internet connection. We recently introduced it. It's called TV Plus. We partnered with TiVo, and it has lots of cool features like live TV, cloud DVR. All the set-top boxes are wireless, so you don't need a connection to each set-top box. Voice remote, just a lot of cool features, but it is the latest. It is not a video product that is delivered over RF. It is a 100% IP-based video product. And then, of course, we have voice services as well, okay? One of the things that we are also very proud about is our employees and their activities in the local community. So I don't have the employee count there in the Bend market, but there's a lot of employees in the Bend market. A few of them are on the call tonight. We do a lot of local events and charitable work in the communities we serve. We give back to the communities that we serve. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our network. What is a network? Well, a network is everything from your laptop or computer in your home out to wherever you're surfing worldwide, right? So that's one complete network. But I'm going to talk specifically about our network and how we get you connected to the world. And we bring that network to your community. What are the benefits of a fiber optic network? Well, it's the benefits of this network that we're talking about tonight is all fiber. Fiber is the latest and greatest. A little later in the presentation, I'm going to talk about fiber more, but fiber optics allows you to grow and allows your growth to be unlimited. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about fiber later in the presentation. We've invested millions in a lot of communities, all fiber. We're basically deploying nothing but fiber at this point. It allows for higher bandwidth and faster speeds that I talked about a little earlier. We have a level of redundancy in our network that you will see in a few slides that, it's a redundant network. So if we have a problem at point A, point B picks up and you will not lose service. Really, the only redundancy that is not in the network is what we call the last mile, or that service basically from a location there in the Sunriver market to your home. It's that last mile. It's that piece of optical cable that will go from the curb to your home. We monitor our fiber network 24/7, 365 days a year. So a lot of times we discover issues before they even affect the customers. And so we have real-time identification of support issues. This is a high-level diagram of what we call our core network. So we have 5 major hubs throughout the United States, or what we call core locations: Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Denver, and Los Angeles. And as you can see by all the green lines and across the network, every part of our network is redundant. So out of Chicago, we have a route to the northwest. There's a route out of Denver to the northwest, and there's also a route out of Los Angeles to the northwest. So that gives us that redundancy that we were talking about. And then all these other lines are going to some of our more rural markets, okay? But we have 5 core locations. We provide peering. We peer with over 324 different providers with over 1,426 peering sessions going on across the United States. So you might ask, what's peering? This next map will kind of show what peering is. Peering is, we peer with providers like Amazon, Netflix, Apple. We peer with some universities. We peer with those internet businesses that see a lot of traffic or see most of the traffic. When we peer, we have a connectivity with that particular internet entity close within the network. So you can see here, we peer in Seattle. So the round figures here on this diagram are routers. We have 2 routers in Seattle. These are some of the companies we peer with in Seattle. Then you have 2 routers in Bend. You'll see we have redundancy to Seattle. So if this connection here gets cut, the other connection picks up the load. And out of Bend, we have redundancy to LA. We have redundancy back to Denver. And then in Seattle, where we have our routers, where we peer with the other companies, we have redundancy out of there back to Chicago, okay? So all these blue lines represent a different path on our internal network. This is the TDS internal network only. And then you would go out of the network to peer with these other companies, okay? So what peering does is, if you're in Bend and you want to watch a Netflix movie, you're going to get it faster. You're going to get it faster because we're peering with Netflix in Seattle. Therefore, the download is quicker, it's faster. You don't have all the different routers to hop across throughout the United States. So that's the main benefit of peering, okay, is a more efficient use of internet traffic and to get that information to the customer quicker. All right. So that's kind of it about our network. You can kind of see how robust it is by these two different maps. Redundancy is very important, and we've done everything we can within reason to build redundancy into our network. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about fiber and high speed, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jacob. So what is fiber? Fiber is literally a piece of flexible glass. Okay, it's a strand of glass that carries light signals. Unlike copper-based services that primarily operate on RF or radio frequencies, fiber optics uses lasers on each end. So there literally is a laser in an ONT that would be placed in your house. There's a laser in the office in Sunriver, and they communicate back and forth via pulses of light, okay? You can transmit light more effectively than you can frequencies. So we can send larger data streams over further distances with fiber. That's a benefit of fiber. Fiber, and this is probably the biggest benefit I feel, fiber is immune to outside interference, okay? It is a piece of glass with pulses of light. So high voltage doesn't affect it. Lightning doesn't affect it. The biggest factor to service-related issues in a copper-based plant, especially coax, like the network you have in place today, is RF, radio frequency interference. So anytime you have an open in your copper plant somewhere, it could be a splitter, it could be anything, it allows for RF to get into that plant, and that creates more issues with copper-based services than anything. You don't have that worry with fiber, okay? And the biggest benefit about fiber, it was mentioned a little earlier, it's pretty much future-proof, okay? It's very scalable. As you can see in one of my first diagrams, you know, we offer gig services, now we're offering 2. We are already looking at and have in the lab equipment to offer up to 10 gig to an individual home. So that is something that we're looking at. I can't say that it's going to happen in the next year or 2 or 3, but that is the flexibility you get with fiber. And, you know, it was pointed out earlier about COVID and how COVID made everybody work from home and Zoom meetings and everything like that. A lot of activity on the net now is done in the cloud. And with fiber, you can scale your speed up so that if all of a sudden you're working at home and you keep files on the cloud, fiber is going to allow you to do that a lot more efficiently than any copper-based service. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Jacob, and he's going to talk a little bit more about your community and what's next for Sunriver. But I do want to finish up by stressing again that what we were talking about here is a complete fiber-based network in Sunriver, so everything would be fiber. All right, thank you, and take it away, Jacob.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next is the agreements. So if you've taken a look at some of the FAQs and that sort of thing that the telecommunications group through your SROA has been providing, you'll see that that we've been working with the SROA for quite some time now on this agreement and what we can do. There are 2 different options that we have looked at pretty intensively. Not every detail is cinched up, but definitely we've gotten most of it, and that's why we're able to do this presentation. Both agreements would involve 18 to 24 month construction timeframe before we can start turning up customers. So that does obviously depend on when the agreement is signed. So we've had questions about when construction would be completed. So I'll just head that one off at the pass before somebody puts it in the chat. So 18 to 24 months before you see your first customer. And let's say that the agreement is signed by June 1st of this year. The construction would be completed by the end of 2025. So December 31st, 2025 would be our estimated completion. Now, these are estimates, and COVID and all of the supply chain issues could disrupt that. But our guys are pretty good at what we do. I would say we've built a lot of fiber networks in the last few years. So this is not news to us. I would say, you know, we're fairly confident on those dates if we're willing to quote them to you, but it is subject to change. TDS would also cover, in both of these agreements, we would cover the cost of install. And just so you know, that was not part of the original agreement. The SROA has done a great job of negotiating on your behalf. Originally, we had what we call a cost to construction, and that's since been covered within the agreement. So TDS would cover the costs of the build. So the first agreement is what we call a services agreement, and it's, in a sense, it's actually very basic. So what it does is it locks in the community to say, hey, we're going to build this fiber network to your home, and it's a 15-year agreement. We cover the costs of the fiber build, and just like we're your provider today, we would be your provider over fiber. Now things don't change a whole lot, because what would happen is TDS would be a individual customer would work with TDS for their services. So, pricing and products wouldn't change a ton. You might see different speeds with the internet. You might see, a different TV product if you haven't upgraded to TV Plus yet. Those kinds of things, right? So otherwise, things would pretty much stay the same. It's a 15-year agreement, as I mentioned, and with an extension to 5. Go ahead and go to the next one for me, Brian. My driver. The next agreement is what we call a bulk agreement. And there's a lot of advantages to this agreement, so there's quite a bit of info here. So what this does is this would change the relationship a little bit. So the SROA would then become our internet customer. So in other words, they would say, we're going to have internet at every home, and it's going to be at a bulk discounted rate. Because as a community, you have that collection and buying power, so to speak. We're able to provide a higher end product at a much lesser price. So the 300 by 300 megabits per second internet service would be paid for by the SROA at a bulk discounted rate of $31.95. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, that's a 42% discount off the current retail rate. And that's locked in a 10-year agreement. That's usually how long our bulk agreements are. Okay, so really nice deal there on the price. Customers can choose still to upgrade beyond that. You still get the benefit of the discount, and you just pay for the difference if you upgrade your internet speed. And of course, you can add on voice and or TV as well, and you would just pay for the amounts that are above and beyond what the SROA is already paying for. Okay. The other benefit of this is the Wi-Fi router is included at no charge, which isn't the case with a standard customer. So with a bulk agreement, you don't pay for any modem rentals unless you want to get those extra access points that Brian was referring to. This stuff I did have to add in there that this is an estimate. It's a pretty close estimate, but it is an estimate, and it's just because we haven't finalized negotiations on every point. So just know that, hey, we were again confident enough to be able to quote this in this arena, but things could still change. Okay, so very good agreement option if you ask me, and excited to talk to you guys about it more. That's it for us.
Thank you very much, Brian and Jacob. Now we want to turn it over to the folks from Gigabit Now and from Sea Ranch. So I'm not sure who is going to take the lead on that. Frank?
Yeah, I'll take the lead.
Okay, Dan Civils.
Yeah, civils. Let me bring up our slide deck so I don't lose my place. As he said, my name is Dan Civils. I'm with Gigabit Now. I've also brought along with me Stephen Milton, who's our CEO and CTO, and Frank Bell, who's the former city manager of Telluride, Colorado, Crested Butte, Colorado, and he is also the former police chief of Park City, Utah. But more reason why he's here today is because he's the community manager, was a community manager for Sea Ranch when we deployed and built the fiber network there for the community. So I'm just going to go through some slides here, and then I'll have Frank share his experience with us when we built the Sea Ranch fiber network. So Gigabit Now is a division of ISOfusion. ISOfusion is a 30-year-old company based in Seattle. Steve's actually one of the founders of that company. I joined the company back in 2003. We're one of the largest privately held internet and telecommunications providers in Washington State. We've got multiple networks across the West Coast. We have data center operations in Washington, in San Francisco, and in LA. We specialize in fiber to the home, HOA fiber networks, business connectivity, and co-location. We've actually got 100,000 square feet of co-location data centers in Washington. Move on. Gigabit Now, like I said, is a division of ISOfusion. It specializes on fiber to the home and community fiber networks. We've been recognized as a specialist in this area for a couple of years now, 6 years. We provide 24/7 live customer service from Pacific Northwest. Our 2 call centers are up in Washington State. We always have provided symmetrical internet speeds, meaning it's the same speed up as it is down, and we never have a bandwidth cap. And we'll get into some of the communities that we've built out and worked with to talk about that a little bit more. We support network neutrality and internet privacy, and we're a complete solution. So Gigabit Now can design and build and construct and operate and provide all the services and the billing and the support for any groups of that. And we've done that for a number of networks. So our expertise. So like I said, we've done master plan communities, we've done private communities, we've done multi-dwelling units like apartment complexes and condo units. We've also done large commercial properties. Having been around for 30 years, we've had a lot of business connectivity, especially in Washington State. Deployed a lot of fiber networks and wireless networks. We have a large wireless deployment up in the San Juan Islands. We've deployed fiber networks for both new and existing HOA. So what that means is we've done what they call a greenfield, which is we build the network as the community is being built. And we've come in and done what they call an overbuild, which we go in and build over the community as it's already existing, which has happened in Sea Ranch. We have a dedicated operations and marketing team for every community we serve. And all of our engineering team is BICSI certified, which is the recognized certification for fiber design, fiber operation. So all of our engineers are BICSI certified. Our community networks. So we're a little different. We think of every community as unique, and therefore network has to be unique because every community has unique needs. And so to that end, all of our community networks are not cookie cutter. They're all unique. They have special services. They have special setup. And that's kind of what makes us special is we adapt to whatever the community is looking for. So in this case, we have the Issaquah Highlands network that's just outside Seattle. Got 18,000 residences, 4,200 units. It's a suburb of Seattle. Lots of different styles of homes. We've been involved in that network since 2003. And we've continued, as that's continued to be built over the many years, we've been continuing to help along and provide services. The next one that I wanted to share is Sea Ranch, California, which again, I'll let Frank talk to this a little bit. It's 3,200 residents, 2,200 lots. It's 2,200 lots is in that there's, not all of the locations have been built out. There's several lots that have yet to be built, even though the community was built in the 60s. And then one of our other fiber communities is Pacific Retirement Services, which is a company over in Medford, Oregon. They provide senior living communities and have 15 locations across the West Coast that we've been building into. We're in their locations in Washington and Oregon and California and Arizona, and we're bringing on 3 or 4 new communities this year. We're also involved in some citywide networks. So some of you may know about Sci-Fi Networks, who is building citywide fiber networks. We're in Fullerton, California, Placentia, California, which is right next door. Salem, Massachusetts starts this summer. We'll start activating in the fall. Simi Valley, California will be again around the same time. And then there's a number of other networks that come after that we're eager to announce. All of those communities that I just mentioned, they're all redundantly fed. And some of them have different needs. Like I said, some of them are a bulk arrangement, like TS was sharing. Some of them are just straight up subscriptions. We can adapt to whatever the community is looking for. Speaking of which, so Sunriver, this is what we've been looking at for Sunriver as we've been having conversations with the association team. So we believe that it should be 100% owned by the community, and it should be a fiber network. It should be a multi-gigabit symmetrical network. Again, symmetrical is up and down, not just 1 gigabit, but 1 gigabit, 2 gigabit, 5 gigabit, 10 gigabit. We're bringing our first multi-gigabit community online here in about 3 months. We provide 1 gigabit services to all our networks today. We expect to be, like I said, delivering multi-gig services in just a few months. We're just waiting on equipment. All of our networks, again, unlimited data usage. We never have capped bandwidth. We've never throttled the connection. It's unlimited. That's in our DNA. We don't believe in limiting your service. The XGS-PON is the way to go for a fiber network like Sunriver, and it's scalable to 10 gig. And I know that we've been having conversations with some electronics vendors that they're working on getting it past 10 gig. And then also for a Sunriver network, it should offer additional options for custom connections. Like I said, every community is unique. Therefore, there's going to be people in the community, businesses or residences that are going to have specialized services. And so when we design a network or build it or operate it, we always try to plan for every possible need, or at least have the options that we can build out. We always bring the fastest Wi-Fi available. We've been providing Wi-Fi 6 for a couple of years now. And we fully expect to be bringing Wi-Fi 6 to future communities. We're actually working with a couple of vendors on the next iteration now, and we're going to be bringing the new Wi-Fi 6 versions out here in a couple of months once the year starts shipping. But many of our communities down in California have been experiencing Wi-Fi 6 for some time. We also have phone service with unlimited calling. Again, it's a big cost savings the way that we deploy it over the network over typical phone service. And then we also have streaming television solutions. So the benefit of our solution for streaming television is it's just that. You need a special box. It can work off your Roku or your Fire Stick or your computer. Many of our TVs have built-in systems. This works with all of them. And it's a full cable replacement package. You get all of your cable channels that you always have had, and it's all streaming. Multiple streaming devices at the same time, cloud DVR, the whole thing. The big benefit with our system is you get all your locals as well. So I talked a little bit about our Sunriver approach. We focus on the community's goals. So again, I said we are a little bit different. We would work with Sunriver to try to determine what's needed to fit the needs of the community. We provide custom community services, operation, marketing. We obviously have the 24/7 live customer service. We also would deploy a team dedicated to the Sunriver community. They would be there on site for whatever the need, network operation issues, installations, customer service. And that's something that we do for all of our networks. All of our networks, we have a dedicated team on site. We also, and Frank, I'm sure we'll talk about this, we always have regular meetings. So when we start a new network, be it at construction or development, or let's say it already exists and we're coming in after it's already stood up, we have regular meetings with both the association and the community to brief them on where we are. And that's just something that we do. So that would be expected. And then we've really focused on the long-term partnership. We don't see this as a vendor customer relationship. We're partnering with you and the association. So again, we think you should own your future. We obviously can help make that happen. We build custom solutions to fit Sunriver's needs. And again, it's a scalable multi-gig connection, not just 1, 2, but all the way up 1, 2, 5, 8, 10, whatever solution that the community is looking for. Symmetrical needs, no limits, dedicated team, and then it's a community partnership. We're not just going to be a vendor. We're going to be there for the long haul, which is what we do with all of our communities. What I would like to do is pass over to Frank, who's had obviously the experience of being our customer. He was involved heavily with Sea Ranch in our deployment, in our negotiation and operations. So Frank, are you out there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Thank you.
I can't see you. I'm sorry. You just tell me when you want me to click.
Oh, I'm here. First of all, just for a point of clarification, we're going to be talking this afternoon about our experience at the Sea Ranch in California. I did spend many years. I'm a government guy, local government guy, and I'm not a technical guy. I spent time as a city manager in Telluride and Crested Butte, but we did not do projects there. We were served by larger existing networks, and we didn't have a need. But when I got to the Sea Ranch in 2010, I was hired as their general manager. I was recruited from Colorado, and the community faced a really unique challenge. It's a very isolated community located on the very northwestern tip of Sonoma County, California. As you can see by the picture, it's right on the coast. We have about 1,950 homes on a little over 2,200 lots spread over 11 square miles of very, very sensitive landscape. Again, it's highly coastal. The community is about 10 miles long and 1 mile wide, maybe a little more than that. We have a strong mix of full-time residences, second homes, and about 450 nightly rentals. With the advent of COVID, of course, our full-time residency and long-term visitation went up dramatically. And finally, and I'm sure Sunriver knows absolutely nothing about this, it's a very politically active community, highly educated, and sometimes very combative constituency. But one thing we all agreed on when I got there in 2010 was the challenge to, next slide, was the challenge to do something about our failing internet service. At the time in 2010, we were served only by rural cellular services. Everybody knows how good those are. We have a landline network that is now owned by Frontier Communications. Most communications providers who provide landlines are not providing much maintenance on those systems anymore and are really trying to get rid of them. And we had a cable TV service provider who was based in Nevada and really has failing service. All of our providers suffered from a lack of maintenance, a lack of investment, poor equipment, low customer base, and there really wasn't much we could do about it as a community. Our community was growing, we were changing, the tech landscape was changing, and even as early as 2000 and 2000 was when the community first formed its first telecommunications committee to investigate this. But when I got there by 2010, the drums were beating loudly that we needed better connectivity. So we started working on that, and as you did, we formed a technical services advisory committee. The board of directors chartered it. It was chartered, I believe, back in 2011, and it was community members, some of whom had a background in technology, and some board members. And at that time, we begged the other providers to come in and help us, and it just simply wasn't going to happen. We were too isolated to connect a network, and we simply didn't have the market to generate enough revenue that anybody was interested in doing that. So they declined, and we were pretty much left on our own. When I got there, we had a new board, and we pledged to the community that we would have a new initiative for improved connectivity, and we got to work on that very quickly. But as we got to work on that, all these questions came up about what does the business model look like? What does the financing model look like? What does the technology model look like? What does the ownership model look like? And our community, our broadband committee got to work investigating all of those options and trying to figure out what to do next. Homeowners associations don't do this stuff very well, and I understand that. It's a real challenge. And so I was riding on an airplane one day and read an article, a magazine article that the folks at Gigabit had written, and I called them up and said, you guys do fiber to home networks, and we'd like one of those. How do we get one? And I met them at a Starbucks cafe in Issaquah, Washington, and toured their Issaquah facility. And again, I looked at all this and said, well, how do we do this? And what are our other options? So Gigabit's been with us for the full time. But that's not to say they were with us exclusively, because all of these different business and construction models really made it a challenge for the community to figure out what it wanted and how to get it done. And the reality is it's not something you can just put out an RFP and make it happen, because these differing business models really make competitive bidding challenging. We had 3 areas of concentration that we needed to work on. That was the design, that was the construction, and then there was the operation. And in the beginning, we thought that was a 3-phased project with perhaps 3 different phases or 3 different contractors in all 3 phases. But the more we worked on it, the more we realized the best approach was a design, build, operate model. And even though we did RFPs, at the end of the day, the design, build, operate model was the winning scenario for the Sea Ranch, and that was the appeal of Gigabit Now, is they could do that for us. We had a lot of community requirements. As we've talked about on some of the technical folks talked about, some of the technical folks said, we need to have future-proof networking, and it needed to be scalable, and it needed to be reliable, and we need to have low maintenance costs. We need to have cost-effective internet services. Nobody wants to pay these bills, but we needed to have adequate speeds. All of our utilities were underground. So this was going to have to be an underground project as well, which involved digging and laying fiber optic cable and conduits over 67 miles of roads. And we were looking for a long-term partnership for operations and management. This isn't something that homeowners associations should be doing. You don't want to be operating call centers. You don't want to be employing maintenance people to go out and deal with this. So we wanted somebody else to deal with it, but we also wanted it to be an investment. We wanted to be an asset of the community, and therefore the community-owned model really rose to the top of what we wanted to do. The project really got going in 2014. As I mentioned, it was underground fiber to every property through conduits alongside the roads. We didn't cut up the roads. The Sea Ranch has a utility easement alongside the roads, so we didn't really have to dig in the pavement. We wanted to know what, there are lots of questions when you build your business model. How many people are going to subscribe? So we asked our membership, how many people would subscribe to this? How many of you intend to subscribe to this service? And at the time we sent it, before anything was ever put in the ground, about 70% of our membership said they would subscribe. Well, the take rate today is up to 87 or 88%. So it was a huge success. But at the time, again, back in 2014, we needed a construction plan, a construction schedule. We need to create central points of contact between our contractors and Gigabit Now and the association. And we needed to be able to communicate with our membership. And we set up schedules to do all of those things. And the beauty of Gigabit Now, at least in my experiences working with them as the owner's representative for the Sea Ranch, was they were intuitively connected to the needs of our community and the importance of communicating with our board of directors and our membership. Things that went right during the project, our construction impact was lighter than expected. We thought that digging and all of that might be more impactful for the membership, but it did not turn out to be the case. In fact, it went better than we had expected. As I mentioned before, we had a higher take rate than anticipated. Our community embraced the construction crews. They would do things like bring them donuts in the morning and invite them to our community events and picnics. The technology that was installed has, to this day, worked flawlessly. The business model that we created was predictive and accurate, and that's really critical for a homeowners association. You need to know that the money is going to be there to pay for this project. We created at the end a master services agreement between the association and Gigabit Now that worked well to establish roles and responsibilities, financial commitments, who pays for what, the terms of service and operations. And it's a very flexible and usable agreement that we use every day. We did have some challenges. Not every day was a wonderful day. We had some change orders that we needed to do. Some of that was caused, a lot of it was caused by us wanting new things. We had far more subscribers than we had anticipated. So the per subscriber cost went up some. So we did have some change orders we had to deal with. But I think Gigabit was on board with those all the way. We got into a bit of a kerfluffle with the California Coastal Commission. Most of the Sea Ranch lies in the sensitive California coastal development area, and the environmental regulations and permitting requirements were much more stringent than we had originally been told and had been led to expect. So we incurred a significant delay and about $800,000 in additional costs due to environmental mitigation as the project went along. This would have been a fine opportunity for any contractor to simply walk away from us and say, you guys are too much work, too much time is going by, and you guys don't have your act together. Gigabit not only stayed with us, but assisted the association working through these challenges and requirements with Sonoma County and the California Coastal Commission, and we were indebted to them for their help in that effort. So it has been a long-term partnership. Gigabit continues to attend regularly scheduled meetings. We had a lot of meetings during construction and a lot of email blasts that went out to our membership, and Gigabit helped me prepare all of those as their owner's representative. Gigabit handles all the support, the billing, the service setup, calls to the service center, all of that. They do that. They have 2 technicians that live on site and handle the needs of the community every day. They can provide service to calls for assistance. They can make connections if people want new connections. They monitor and maintain the 2 data centers we have on the community, and they maintain the network infrastructure. And over time, as people became more familiar, not only with the technology and the services the technology allows, the technical assistance of the Gigabit staff, I think really has put the community at ease. And a lot of our support questions have declined over the years. So what do we have? We have a network, a fiber optic network underground. Nobody can see it. You can't see a single thing, nor can you see any evidence that anything was ever laid underground. You can have you can have 100 MBS up and down, or you can have more. You can choose what sorts of connections through Gigabit you want. We have a partner in Gigabit we can trust. They've become a part of our community. But most importantly, I think is because the association now owns a valuable asset. And after we retire the debt that the community incurred in building this network, and that debt's roughly $8 million, and it's well on its way to being retired. Once that debt is retired, and I think that comes in 2029, the association will have about maybe a little over $500,000 a year in non-assessment based revenue. That's money you can work with in your community that you're not going to get a bill through your assessment for. And we have a modern community-owned fiber optic network every single lot on the Sea Ranch. So when you build your new house, all you have to do is go out to the edge of the street and your fiber optic cable is waiting for you. So it's been a great success for us. If we knew then what we know now, would we do it again with Gigabit Now? And the answer to that question is absolutely, without question. They did a great job for us. They became our friends, and they've helped us invest in our own community. And it's been I tell you this because it's been a terrific working relationship.
Okay, thank you, Frank and Dan. Appreciate your time and effort in putting this presentation together. Keith, we now want to open it up for questions from the viewers on this program. So take it away, Keith. Keith, you're on mute.
Yes, hi. Good. It's Keith Caceres, Assistant Manager. Just want to say yes. I also want to say thank you to Dan and Frank for your presentation, and also to Jacob and Brian from TDS Telecom and Broadband. Yes, we do have a few questions here from the audience, and let me start. And feel free, owners that are listening on, please feel free to add your questions to the chat box, and we will try to get those answered for you. One of the first questions that came up today was, this is for TDS and Broadband. You're currently providing fiber to homes south of Sunriver, like in the Lapine area. How is that working so far? And how many customers in that area? And what is the base subscription fee that they're paying for that service?
I can take that one, Jacob. So yes, probably about 2.5 to 3 years ago, a decision was made to completely overbuild the community of Lapine. We completed that overbuild this last summer. We are still migrating customers onto that network, but that is an all fiber network. That is a GPON network. When we made the decision to do that 2.5 years ago, we had not deployed XGS-PON yet, but the build in Sunriver would be XGS-PON. I can't tell you how many subscribers we have because I don't have that information handy right now, but it was a proactive build by TDS because the plant in Lapine was deteriorating rapidly. So, we monitor our network across all markets, and then we invest so much money every year in fiber overbuilds, and we base our fiber overbuilds on markets that have, poor plant or a higher rate of failure, and Lapine was one of those. So there's no homeowners association or anything down there. And as far as the question on charges, if you go on to Ben's website, you can look up the community of Lapine and you can find out what they're paying for their services down there. You basically pay the same if you chose the standard agreement or the first agreement that Jacob mentioned. I don't work with the consumer retail pricing a lot, so I don't have all the pricing off the top of my head, but that is something we could get you to if you wanted that.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Another question, this is for Ben Broadband. I think, Jacob, you already answered this, but does this assume the 15-year agreement in 24 months before you start construction?
Yeah, so just to refresh the memories, so the services agreement is a 15-year agreement. The bulk agreement would be a 10. In either agreement, it would be 18 to 24 months before we see the first home activate. So in other words, a construction would start as soon as possible. There are some engineering pieces that we would need to finalize before we could really start construction, but that timeline means from the time that we sign the agreement, we expect 18 to 24 months before we see the first home turned on. And sorry, Keith, just 1 second. I wanted to make sure to introduce my other panelists in case we get called on them. So Gail Long is here with us, Nicole Jorenstad, and Brandon Chenoweth, and I know they're all here to help Brian and I fill in some gaps with all the questions that can come our way.
One
Sounds great.
follow-up question on that, Jacob, is if the bill doesn't take, the first customer doesn't get signed up for 24 months, does that mean that the agreement is only eight years really, because nobody can sign up until for 24 months? The 10-year agreement, does the 10-year agreement start when we sign the contract or when the first customer comes online?
Gail or Brian might be able to speak to that better than I could. Which of you wants to take that? Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I don't want to cough. I mute myself. Typically, they start when the first customer's turned up. So when the first customer would be turned up, the 10-year agreement would start, not based on the last, but the first customer.
Yeah, that may not be true if we go with the services agreement option. I'd have to double check on that. Gail, I don't know if you know the answer to that one. No, okay. Yeah, we'd have to check on that one. But the services agreement is also what we have in place today, right? It just doesn't have the fiber overbuild. So it'd be a replacement for that services agreement if we went with that option. So it's a bit different situation.
Got it. Under option 2, what TV service would be offered in regards to option 2 with the bulk agreement that you mentioned earlier from your team?
Yeah, I can take that as well. So, so the TV services offered are really the same regardless of which option we go with, because either way, the only thing that's changing between the services and the bulk is the internet. So either option, you can sign up for voice or TV, and it's our current TV product, if I can learn to speak, is TDS TV Plus is the name of that product, and it's available today over cable, but certainly it's designed to work on a fiber network. It's a really nice product.
Yeah, so the TV Plus product, just to add one thing, Jacob, if anybody wants more information on the TV Plus product or the channel lineup and the additional channels you can add, it would be pretty much the same as the Lapine market.
Great, thank you. This is kind of more of a comment/question. One of our owners mentioning that the deterioration in their current service has progressed over the past 2 to 3 years. Has Ben Broadband TDS stopped investing in maintenance and upgrades since their current system is terminal? Current service right now is untenable.
So this is Brandon with TDS, and I can kind of speak to that a little bit. Know that our maintenance and upgrades out there have not stopped in any way, shape, or form. So I don't have the details. There's multiple departments that work from the ISP side and the OSP side. We still have techs out there, excuse me, assigned out there as our normal area, always making sure things are running properly and upgrading as needed. And as I believe Brian or Jacob said, our plant is monitored 100% of the time, 24/7, 365. And if any particular areas of that plant have saturation, they're in jeopardy, they're out, there's a problem, our techs are dispatched right away to that location. Now, I don't obviously want to get into the weeds of specific cases, but there is a lot of technical issues that stem all the way from plant to house specific issues with house wiring, right? So deterioration of service can come from many different things. But to answer the question, absolutely not have we stopped investing money at the Sunriver location. We're putting in commercial fiber for commercial customers out there still today, all the time. And we are keeping the residential side up as best we can on a coax network. But that is also why we have proposed the fiber network for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. And I'll just add to that. So we had a similar question come up in the last session. Well, phrased differently, but my answer would be similar. Is we get these kind of calls, all the time, and it sounds like it's happening to the whole community, but actually it's happening to 1 or 2 folks that might be experiencing problems in their home. If you feel like you're having issues, highly recommend calling in. Anything can bring that up. It can be a line issue straight to your home or a line affecting multiple homes. Typically, we see those proactively, like Brandon's saying, on the network, but the ones that we don't see, we definitely need to know if that's happening so we can get out there and fix it. The Wi-Fi issues may not always be within our control, but certainly if there's a signal issue going to that modem, it's something that we can address. So yeah, please, if you're having issues and you feel that it's untenable, please give us a call and we'll look at that.
And real quick, to assure that situation, and I've seen this in other town halls, I have personally stayed out there the last 6 years in a row during your guys' Christmas to New Year's peak season. And I have rented a different house every time. Every house I've been to has had TDS, been broadband service. And in the peak season where the saturation limits are the highest, none of those houses have had a single streaming or connectivity issue. So if it did, trust me, I report that back to the powers that be and we make sure we're on top of it. But the last 6 years that I've been out there during peak season has been very successful. And we pride ourselves in taking care of that.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Jacob, on that. Gerhard, this looks like it might be a question for our panelist. Does the committee have a comparison table that looks at features from this organization and that supports building our own network, offer plus and minuses of each?
Yeah, so we do have, if you go to the website, there is a short section that talks about the pros and cons of, continuing with TDS, broadband TDS, or building a community-owned network. It's our intent, and it's our intent to expand upon that, and that's one of the reasons why we've invited TDS and we've invited these other service providers onto these calls to get additional information. But it's our intent to add additional information as we get it. And we have on the task force, we've got a series of action items that people are working on in terms of gathering up additional information under both models, and we should be able to provide that to Sunriver owners probably within the next month or so.
Great, thank you, Gerhard. On the Gigabit Now approach, how is maintenance and repair done and paid for? Going forward, for example, for Sunriver, who would perform those tasks?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, we deploy a team of people that would be either in the community or near the community so that they could be there within minutes if there's an issue. And they would cover all of the tasks for outside plant maintenance, service calls, what have you. And as far as the cost, it all depends on the business model we worked out with the Sunriver Association. Like I mentioned, every community is unique. So all of our deployments have a unique model that's specific to their needs. So typically, I will share that those costs, our team costs, are our own.
Thank you, Dan. Great. And for TDS Ben Broadband, is there presently a conduit system here for coax? And would fiber use the same conduit line? At the end of the TDS contract, who owns the conduit? So that was the question. Half of that question was asked last time, but I'll let you guys answer.
Yeah, and I'll try and do a better job of including the answer from last time. So we do have a conduit system in place for coax, and currently the build for fiber is an estimate. So obviously, like we said, we are talking about covering the costs of bringing fiber to Sunriver. Regardless, we do intend to use some of the conduit, but where the conduit is either out of code or deteriorated, we'll be paying for the replacement of that. Now, in terms of who owns it after the agreement, in the services agreement, there is a snippet of language that the SROA has really been very vocal about, and so they do have a option to purchase the plant at the end of the 15-year agreement. We haven't unfortunately gotten that far in the bulk agreement to discuss those kind of details. So I don't have an answer in terms of the bulk agreement.
One clarification, Jacob, that just so owners understand is a good portion of your coax plant in Sunriver is a direct bury right now. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. And and then the intent would be is that, that direct bury would be abandoned, so to speak, and you would put in a new conduit that would carry fiber to the homes.
Yeah, the Brandon touched on that in a previous question. And yes, where there are sections where there is no conduit and the coax is directly in the ground, we may have to leave that during construction, since it would typically do more damage than good to pull that out. So that's if Brandon, if I didn't summarize that correctly, feel free to chime in.
No, that was spot on. It when you're dealing with direct buried cable of any kind, it can be 10 times more intrusive to try to remove than to just cut it, cap it, and leave it in place.
Great. So switching back to independent build, are there federal funds available to support an independent build?
Yeah, so I think, Steve, you probably know the best on this. I'll let you go at this one.
So kind of on our estimate and understanding of the federal funds, this network, because it is a well-served area, would not be eligible for most of the federal funds for doing an independent build. There are some ARPA funds that are down at the city level that were part of the COVID relief funds, the emergency funds that were granted to cities and counties. Some of those funds might be applicable, but that'll be a process to go through and try and see if the city was willing to allocate those to this particular piece of a network. They're usually more reserved for citywide projects or for the most disconnected parts of city or county territories. So it's less likely that it would be eligible.
Let me add a little bit on that, because we did approach the county in our case about the ARPA funds, and it's the opinion of our county staff that we are not eligible for those funds. And now, we haven't challenged it, vigorously and says, "Oh, wait a minute," but that was the statement that came back from them after we asked about that.
Yeah.
And maybe Gail has some information on this, but I can tell you what little I know, and that is that those funds were primarily meant and targeted for areas that are underserved. I mean, by all means, try for those funds, but I don't think that they would consider Sunriver underserved with gig service today. But by all means, I would, not recommend that you not try, but that's my understanding of how the federal funds were to be used.
Yeah, this is Gail. So yeah, I concur with the other comments. This area would not be eligible for those federal funds because it will be determined that it is served because it gets over 100 by 20 megabits per second at the service location. So I don't think that's a viable option for the Sunriver Association.
Yeah, Gail would know this well. It's her job in other areas of our company as well, right? So.
And I have seen these funds used in other areas, other TDS markets, but it's always been a very rural market that only had like a DSL type service in place. That the max was probably 50 meg or something like that. So that's been my experience where I've seen these funds used. Now, some states have different funding rules, so there might be some funds available at the state level, but the federal guidelines were very strict in that it's supposed to be for underserved areas or territories.
Thank you. Second part to the same question from the owner: could broadband service in Sunriver operate as a co-op similar to Midstate Electric? Who would like to answer that? Gerhard, we've had some discussions on that in the past. So
Yeah, just as a way of thinking about that, when you're as an HOA owned fiber network, you are in essence operating very similar to a co-op model, and that it is a network that is owned by the members. It's a slightly different legally, but very similar as far as business model and kind of net effect.
That's what I was going to say too, Steve. I mean, we aren't, the owners association isn't a co-op per se, but in structure, it's very similar to what a co-op would be like.
thank you, Steve and Gerhard. Back to Dan. What are the current rates for various speeds available by Gigabit Now? That might be a hard question to answer.
Well, it is a little challenging. Like I said, it goes back to every community being unique, so they all have their own schedule of rates and services. I can share that in some of our communities in California, They're currently getting gig for well under $60. I think it was like 50 something. In Sunriver situation, I mean, we've been interacting with the association for probably 2-3 years now, discussing different options. One of the proposals that we gave a year and a half ago in our discussions was, TDS mentioned a bulk deal. We had brought that up, I think it was 2020, excuse me, 2020. And I think depends on a lot of different factors. We were proposing something around 35 for 2 gig. So it really depends. I mean, those business model discussions matter. So, but just to kind of share that, that was part of our discussion back in 2020.
Thank you very much. Question came in, what is the staffing impact for SROA? So if we built our own fiber to the home network, what would be the staffing options, or would that change what they currently are today?
Yeah. So our goal at Gigabit Now is to make sure you guys have no need for any more staff. That's something that we want to take under our belt and make sure that you enjoy owning your fiber network, but you don't have to take any more costs other than getting it built. But I'll let Frank share. I mean, Frank, I don't recall you hiring anybody new on your team.
We did not. I was the owner's representative for the project for the entire term. I was the general manager. And it was just one of those other duties as assigned. I was also represented the owner during the construction phase. And I did that so I could get out of the office once in a while. And it was fun. We have an IT person, much like Sunriver, who has some additional responsibilities and goes to the meetings and so forth. But it's really not about doing a lot of work. It's about staying informed and communicating and making sure that the membership, whatever needs the membership has, or whatever needs the partnership has, are met. So a lot of our staff put in some additional time. We did not hire anybody. Most of that time, since the project has been up and operating for a couple of years now, several years, most of that extra time has sort of fizzled away. And I don't think they're really doing much. It's a few hours a week.
Yeah, let me kind of just real briefly address that more generally, not just with respect to Gigabit Now, but if Sunriver Owners Association builds a network, we build our own fiber to the home network. Our intent would be to contract with one of the service providers to actually perform the maintenance for us. And so the intent would be is that this network would be maintained by professionals outside of the Sunriver Owners Association. And then one quick clarification, Dan, the number you mentioned, the $35 a month for the gigabit service, I think that was for just as a service provider, not with the construction of the network cost built into that. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think if I recall, and I don't have it right in front of me, that was, in a not a 100% bulk deal, but close to it. I mean, I think it was an 80% take rate. But it was, 2 gig symmetrical with all the gear for, I think it was 35.
Okay,
But,
thank you.
I mean, business models matter, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's what we modeled early on when we first started talking.
Thank you. And Frank, this is back to you. How did Sea Ranch fund the $8 million build?
I should have put that in the what went right, what went wrong slides. We had originally been working with a commercial lending institution to fund 80% of the project. At the last minute, they backed away from the project. They were acquired by another lender, and that dissolved. So we ended up borrowing money from our membership in $250,000 increments. Sea Ranch is not a wealthy community by any means, but we do have some people with some resources, and we were. I had a long list of members that were willing to invest. We at the time paid 5% interest. Obviously, that's taxable. It's not a municipal as an HOA, we're not a governmental entity, so it's taxable income, but we had about 50 people who were willing to loan us money in $250,000 increments to get the project done.
Great, thank you, Frank. Frank, we appreciate that.
The other, just if I can jump in, one of the other options that we talk about in prior conversations is Gigabit Now has investment groups that are always interested in investing. There's also an opportunity that Sunriver would own the network and pay a loan off over time from one of our investment groups. So that is another opportunity out there, just to make sure everyone understands that.
Thank you, Dan. Switching to TDS broadband currently, why do you guys currently have data caps on internet service?
So with the PON services that we're proposing today, there are no data caps. We have not had data caps on any of our products now for several years. So any customer that has a data cap more than likely has an older DOCSIS delivered service. Data caps were incorporated years ago to prevent basically abuse because one person that I'll say hammers or slams a network and uses a ton of bandwidth affects in a coax situation, affects the service of others around them. That was the case years ago. The coax network now, we've extended nodes and built it out. It's a little more robust, so we don't see that as much. So we did away with our data caps several years ago. And again, we talked about this already. Gigabit mentioned it as well. One of the advantages of a fiber network that we're talking about, and especially XGS PON, is that is not an issue. So if you have a customer using a ton of bandwidth, they do not have a negative impact on the overall network of their neighbors.
Great, thank you. In the TDS option 2, which would be the bulk agreement with a 15-year service option and a 10-year bulk pricing lock, as Jacob mentioned, if that's true, what would be the rate for years 10 to year 15?
So in bulk agreements, we have never done more than a 10-year agreement. I would have to, confer with my leadership team on if we would be willing to extend it out for 15 years. It's something we could look at. We do have some bulk agreements where it's written in that after, a 10-year term, that there could be a rate increase implemented, and there's always a not to exceed, and it's usually based on a percentage. So if you're concerned about that, there's language that we can write in there. If we do have to do a rate increase after 10 years, a not to exceed type language.
Yeah, and just to be clear, these during the presentation, there are two separate agreements, right? So the services agreement is 15, the bulk agreement is 10. If you guys went with the bulk agreement, it would just simply be a 10-year agreement, unless, like Brian's saying, we looked into extending that. So yeah, there should be no in-between time. In the case of a 10-year bulk agreement, at the end of that, we would obviously be talking with the SROA about what to do next, right? Do we want to continue with a new bulk agreement? Do we want to, look at something else? So yeah, it's either a 10 or a 15. There should be really no quasi in between there.
Thanks for answering that, Jacob. We appreciate that. We'll stick with TDS broadband for a moment. Would TDS provide fiber equity between Bend and Sunriver regarding service? I assume they mean service and price, but that's the question that's posed.
Yes, I mean, the Sunriver community is not going to be treated any different than Bend or Lapine or Madras or any of the other communities out there. So from a network perspective, we do not put any prioritization on any traffic out of any community in any way, shape, or form. And so from a pricing perspective too, the price points for Sunriver would be at the same as the market level for the other communities of similar size out there.
Okay, thank you. In regards to bringing fiber to the home here in Sunriver, what are the barriers to bringing our own fiber to the home build out to Sunriver?
I can start that, and maybe others might want to comment on that. But in putting any kind of fiber to the home system in place, the big challenge is putting the infrastructure in place, and what that amounts to is digging trenches. Trenches that are on the order of 18 inches to 2 feet deep. maybe about a 1/2 foot to 3/4 of a foot wide, putting a piece of conduit down at the bottom of that trench. When you have to cross a road or cross a pathway, generally we would want people to bore or tunnel underneath that, and so they have to do the tunneling. And then to get the fiber or get the conduit all the way to the home, and then typically the fiber is installed by being blown in or fed in through the conduit. So the construction is it's a big challenge, because there's probably over we're estimating, I think, and Brad or Dick might have better numbers on this, but I think we're estimating over 120 miles of conduit that would have to be put in Sunriver. And so it's a significant amount of trenching and boring that has to take place. That's really, one of the challenges with Sunriver is that when you start trenching and boring, you sometimes run into lava rock, and that becomes a little bit more problematic.
And if I could speak to that as well, I know that I've been in all 3 presentations with the homeowners associations, and there's been all kinds of different options proposed. What you've primarily seen today is, Ben builds it, Gigabit builds it, manages it, maintains it, all of that can be negotiated. I know in one of the previous presentations, there was an option discussed where Sunriver assumes all responsibility. You build and maintain the network with basically no, third party involved. And there are a lot of obstacles to that type of, network build. So again, it comes back down to pros and cons. And I know one of the previous homeowners in one of the other calls mentioned, what are the obstacles if we build and maintain our own network? Well, if you build and maintain your own network, you have to make sure you have, connectivity, employees, call centers, trucks, test equipment. You probably need legal representation at some point, because you're more than likely going to get a subpoena. You're going to have to keep up with all the government and regulatory issues that may come down the pipe. So if you don't partner and you do decide to build your own network and maintain your own network, those are all factors that you really, really need to consider. Because I know I've seen a lot of municipalities build their own networks over the years, and then they fail because they didn't allot for all the costs that go into maintaining that network.
Okay,
From Gigabit Now's perspective, I certainly the construction is the significant part, and I'll let Frank answer one question I'll have for him just to share his perspective. But the construction can be minimized a great deal when you have a team that has done it before. I know our team for Oregon, they build fiber networks for the military, so they've been tested way beyond residential networks, and they do it all the time. So not to minimize the construction, but it's easier depending on who you bring in. The other challenge I know from a fiber network, I think, it's just getting everybody on board. And Frank, do you have any other thoughts on what happened in Sea Ranch?
Well, I think it's important to remember that when you're doing trenching, you're not trenching everywhere all at once. If you're up at the north end, you're not at the south end. And, if you're at the east end, you're not at the west end. So you're trenching in individual neighborhoods, and that happens amazingly quickly. One of the challenges we had was tree roots. And I know you guys have got trees, but we had redwood trees. And not only did we have redwood trees that were growing in the coastal development zone, so the rule was you couldn't cut a redwood root if it was more than 4 inches in diameter. Well, okay, tell that to the redwood tree. So, digging is challenging. There's no question about it. I don't want to minimize it, but I don't think anybody should be scared that it's going to be a nightmare of closed roads and noisy machinery and all of this stuff. It's in a neighborhood specific, happens very quickly in that neighborhood, and they move on to the next neighborhood, and you never knew they were there.
Okay, with that, I think we're gonna cut it off because we're getting close to the time limit. I would like the participants to stay online after we dismiss or whatever the outside guests. So a couple of things we want to share with the owners themselves. I do want to thank Gail and Jacob and Brian and Brandon and Nicole from Ben Broadband for attending all 3 of these sessions, and for Dan, Steve, and Frank for attending today's session. A lot of work involved, a lot of time and effort was spent, and we truly appreciate that effort on helping to educate our homeowners on what we need to do. So with that, I'm going to have the outside folks leave, and then we're going to carry on for just about 5 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
I see Gail and Dan still. Are they trying to leave? Or do you want to sneak in and listen?
Sorry. No sneaking around here. I don't know why it won't go off. Weird.
I can remove you on
Try
this.
again.
There you go. Okay. Dan, okay, that's left.
I think Dan's gone. Dan, you've gone?
Here, I'll just remove him. There we
There
go.
you go.
Gerhard, you want to show us the last slide?
Sure, I'd be happy to, John. Let me bring it up here.
He's doing it. Thank you for the participants for listening in on this. It's important to hear the story and help us make the decision. Go, Gerhard.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Hang on a second. All right, there we go. Okay, so just really kind of quickly summarizing, we're talking about a couple different options here. One is we can renew our contract with Ben Broadband. And as the people from Ben Broadband mentioned, there are 2 different contracts that we're looking at. I think, in terms of pros as we see it, one is that there's no cash outlay required by owners. Ben Broadband is a full service provider. They do cable TV, internet, phone service. So, from an owner's perspective, I mean, there's really no change in the service provider for current Ben Broadband customers. I mean, it's going to be pretty much a transparent process for you, other than, at some point in time, they're going to come to your home and they're going to have to do some installation work in your home. But then after that's done, you will have the new fiber to the home service. Also, based on our current estimates, the network upgrade would likely be, somewhere in the order of 1 to 2 years quicker with Ben Broadband than if we go ahead and build our own network. Now, Gigabit Now, kind of had timeframes that are comparable to Ben Broadband, so it may not necessarily be true that Ben Broadband would be faster. But if we decided that we wanted to build our own network, not with a Gigabit Now as an example, that would probably take an extra couple of years. Some of the cons, Sunriver owners, we've heard from a number of owners who have had significant service quality issues with Ben Broadband. Some of those issues would go away once the fiber to the home network is in place versus the coax network. But some of those service issues are, kind of what you might call business issues. That is the way that they address service and their customer focus. And I think, there has been some history there that would indicate that we don't have quite the level of attention from Ben Broadband that we used to have before TDS bought them. And, part of this process would be to figure out and says, okay, how can we make that a little bit stronger? SROA would have to enter into either a 10-year or a 15-year no-compete contract with Ben Broadband. So basically what that means is we would be in a sole provider situation. So that would be a limitation going forward, and no option for competitive suppliers. So that kind of, the nutshell around Ben Broadband. If we decide to build our own network, obviously.
Can I break in again?
Sure. Go ahead, Keith.
I noted that the 15-year service agreement now has a +5 that they're looking for the option to extend for 5 more years after the completion of 15.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different than the existing +5 in terms of the existing +5 was an automatic additional 5 years unless there had been some kind of major quality issue that the Owners Association brought up. The +5 on the negotiated agreement that we have right now, that we haven't signed on to, says that it's by mutual consent. And so we Sunriver Owners Association could automatically say at the end of 15 years, no, we are not going to renew. And in addition, we have the option, I think it's 3 years in advance. So after 12 years, we have the option of informing them that we are going to start proceeding with building our own network. And so there isn't going to be this, okay, at the end of 15 years, now we want to transition, but we don't have an alternative network built up at that point in time.
And I also wanted to again mention the fact that we recently did approve or agree on a water rate increase that was basically half of what had been requested. We were able to do that because water is regulated and telecommunication services are not. So we are pretty much at the mercy of our provider without a competitive environment. And finally, the rate of return that is anticipated, I think, by most telecommunications providers is somewhere in the 15 to 25% range, which is a good deal of money over 15 or perhaps 20 years.
Okay, good points, Keith. Looking at a Sunriver owned fiber to the home network, again, some of the pros, it puts us completely in control of our telecommunications services. We own the network. We decide who gets to provide services on that network. We get to determine, are we going to have one supplier? We're going to have two suppliers? We're going to have 5 suppliers. So that's really under it's under our control. Owners could contract with one of several different competitive service providers. And so, as an example, if Sunriver built their own network, we could go contract with Gigabit Now. They could provide service. We could contract with another service provider, and they could also provide service. And then you could decide, do you want Gigabit Now service or do you want service from this other supplier? And as Keith mentioned, I mean, the big benefit of that is not so much just that you have choice, but because there are options, the suppliers are going to be more aggressive in terms of their pricing, and they're going to be more focused on providing you with a good service in order to maintain you as a customer. There's no danger of corporate takeover. And so we saw that with Ben Broadband, which was pretty much a local organization, now has been taken over by TDS. TDS does not have the same level of community involvement that Ben Broadband had. And so there's been a little bit of a degradation since that has happened from the perspective of the Sunriver owner. And then, in the long run, in the long run means that after the network is completely paid for, and you heard Frank talk about this in terms of Sea Ranch, is that after the network is completely paid for, then you have a situation where you can either reduce rates significantly to the end customer, or you can take that money and reinvest it in something else that's important to the community. And so that's, again, in the long run, it's likely to be cheaper if we build our own network. Some of the cons, and again, it requires significant upfront investment on the order of about $20 million. It was kind of an interesting comment made by Frank, and said that they got their capital by going to their owners, and some owners gave them the money at kind of a fixed interest rate. So that's an option we haven't explored at this point in time, but that may be an interesting option to take a look at, see if there are some river owners who are willing to make the upfront investment at a fixed interest rate, and instead of going to a bank, as an example. As I mentioned earlier, it could possibly take longer to construct and bring online. That is, if we build our own network, that is likely to be about a 5-year service. And in reality, we're probably not going to be able to turn that service up before the end of the 5-year extension to the Ben Broadband contract, which ends in June of 2027. And then finally, if you own the fiber optic network, then you have to, you can get companies to come in to provide internet service. But once you have that internet service, then you as the owner have got to go off and find somebody to provide TV service if you want TV service, or somebody to provide phone service if you want phone service. There are a lot of companies that do this right now, and so it's not a difficult thing to do, but it is something where you don't have that one-stop service model as you would have with a Ben broadband, or if, as an example, Gigabit Now does provide that level of service also. So they're kind of more of a full scale provider. Excuse me. So that's it for my presentation. And really, the key point for us right now is to hear from customers as to, or Sunriver owners about their perspective and what they would like to see going forward in terms of our own network, in terms of a fiber to the home network in Sunriver.
Okay, thank you, Gerhard. Thank you all for attending this and for sticking with us. I think you can appreciate the difficulty that the task force is having on trying to weigh the pros and cons of the two options. And the more, as Gerhard said, the more feedback and input we get from you, the fellow owners, it'll figure out how we do this. Now, Gerhard, why don't you talk a little bit, just for 2 minutes, on the process going forward, what we think is going to happen.
Yeah, thank you, John. So our intent right now is we're trying to gather up as much information as we can so that the Telecommunication Task Force can make a recommendation to the Sunriver Board of Directors prior to their April meeting. The hope is that then the Sunriver Board of Directors can make a decision if they want to go for a vote of the ownership in terms of how to proceed. That vote of the ownership would take place during the August timeframe when we normally have our new board election vote. And so the objective for us right now is to gather up the information. You heard quite a bit of it today. We're going to kind of summarize it, put it in an easily digestible form. We also are planning on doing a homeowner survey in the next month to get more feedback from owners as to how they would like to see us proceed. We'll summarize all that information and provide it to the board of directors prior to their April meeting so that they can then decide how to proceed, if they want to proceed with a vote of the owners or not. So that's kind of what we have in store.
Okay. I think that's it for today. We appreciate your attendance and thank you. And if you have any more the questions, send them in. And if you raised a question we didn't answer, we will answer it and put it on our website. So go to the Sunriver Homeowners website and we'll try to provide that answer. So again, thank you for your time and energy and have a good day. We're all done.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Stretch.